Right, Jim. I'm going to show you the workflow that I use to make garments and my characters for Unity. I don't know very much about Blender at all. Uh, so anyone who knows Blender, I'm very keen to chat to. A few years ago, there was a guy called Manuel Bastioni, an Italian guy. Uh, oh, oh, that's something else. Anyway, Manuel Bastioni, Manuel Bastioni, he's the guy who wrote or helped to write the Blender manual, and he created Make Human as well. But he was working on this project of this humanoid character creation, and he started a Patreon page. It didn't get hardly any Patreons. He got sort of upset with the community, took his YouTube channel down, took his website chat down, but it was open source, and I have an entire copy of his website and most of his videos, which I had offline anyway. So about 18 months ago, this guy stopped, but it was open source, and so I can still use it, but no one else can, if you like. Now I'm stuck with Blender 2.79 because of it, because that's when which is no big deal. I could probably run both, but it creates this add-on which allows you to create Afro, Asian, and Caucasian characters, male and female. It also does some elves and dwarfs and stuff. But so if I create an African male, just to show you, I think it's widely recognised that the topology on these characters is really good. So you could tell, with no shades or anything, that's an African guy. If I create, say, an Asian male, you can tell that this is an Asian male, even with no shaders and stuff on. So he really does know his anatomy and Blender. So it's such a shame that he stopped doing it, but I can still generate his characters. And I think I'm the only person that's got them to work in Unity so far, because there's no one doing it anymore. So rather than create my own characters, which would be a nightmare, well, I can't create anything in Blender. If I go wireframe, oh god, no. How do you do solid? If I go, my god. I don't know what I've done here now. Aim selected. No, not edit mode. There, the topography is really good. The way these quads are, twisting down the arm there. You can tell with the knees that most people just make a tube for legs and just change the shape of it. He's obviously thought about how it's going to move once it's textured and rendered. So, and the same with his facial expressions. And do you know what I mean? He's done. This is a low poly mesh, but I've seen videos on YouTube that people explaining how good this topography is. So I've got access to this. I can create these characters, but I'm no good with Blender. I don't. The thing about the thing about game design is you can't do everything as an expert. You can't become an expert at everything, so it takes you about 200 years. So you've got to try and get some assets or anything that will help you progress the project. And taking a year out to become a Blender expert is not an option. So I picked ancient Rome as a setting, mostly because they just wore tunics, and I thought there's a chance I might be able to make tunics because they're just like a bedsheet with a hole in, aren't they? So this is what I've done. So to make clothes, I've got a dodgy, really old, dodgy version of Marvelous Designer. This is Marvelous Designer 2 from about 2004. The last standalone Marvelous Designer was 9, I think, and now it's Marvelous Designer 2019, and I think it's about I think it's quite expensive now. Pricing Marvelous Designer, £50 a month, $50 a month, or $500. But anyway, I've got a dodgy version. So I'm going to copy, and you make patterns like this. Copy that, delete that, and then paste that. So you make a pattern literally just by drawing this on there. CV. And it's sort of this is mirroring it on both sides. This is a pattern side, this is a 3D side. If I'm hesitating when I'm moving things around, it's because everything has got a different way of manipulating stuff, keys and what have you. So literally you get clothes like this. Now I'm sure you will appreciate how difficult it is to make something like clothes in Blender. But this is quite interesting. You might be quite interested in this as well. It's Blender related and you're into Blender. So then you get your two halves of the garment, you go into segment sewing and you sew them together. You can imagine that those are like big long stitches. Do you know what I mean? So you would, and then a little bit fiddly. Even the mouse wheel is the opposite to Blender. So I've sort of sewn them there now on one side anyway. I'll quickly do the other side if I can. Come on, sew it. This isn't even, this is just an experiment. So I've joined these with giant stitches, and then you can simulate puts it on, and there's obviously lots of different sorts of fabrics and I seem to be in a strange mode here. I don't know why I can't select it, but you can change this to wool or cotton, and there's tons of stuff you can do with it. Weird. Pan design, simulation cloth. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know why I can't. There we go. So I think obviously I could change the colour of this to be something else and make it like pink. But then there's to make it wool, and it'll change its when you simulate. It'll change it ever so slightly. Watch how the sleeves change between. So that's a woolen sleeve, and it can obviously make it denim, which will be different. Satin will be different again, I should think. So anyway, this creates this garment. I can export this garment as an OBJ file, but it's in triangles. So if I go into Blender and open one up, which I saved earlier when I tried to make this video and the mic wasn't working, import OBJ, garments, gymtest.object. This is made of triangles, which I'm led to believe that it's bad for texturing. So I use an interesting. To turn tries into quads is quite difficult unless you've got something like ZBrush, which is like another 50 quid a month or something. But there's this research project, this is open source, called Instant Meshes, which is quite an interesting concept, because obviously this is in tries, and I didn't want to do that. So let's say I want to make this about 3. I know that this 3,000 quad, 3,000 verts is about right for this garment. And I can solve the orientation field, which this is the orientation that the quads are going to go in. So I can make them go, I can get this comb here and go like that. And then it would make quads that follow that pattern. Do you know what I mean? It's really interesting. I don't want them to follow that pattern, but if for instance I did, that's it's an option. Then so you solve the orientation field, then you solve the position field. It makes quads. Quite nice, really. You can make it pure quads, so there's no tries whatsoever, but that makes it a bit bigger, which is okay, I suppose. And there's lots of options, but basically I can extract this as a mesh and get it into Blender. Now to make this, I don't know how easy it would be to make this in Blender, but I imagine it's quite difficult to get the folds and this lot going on. So that's how I turn the tries into quads. So I can make garments. That avatar that was in Marvelous Designer, I made myself from the template from Manuel Bastioni. So what you can do now is I could create say an African female. Don't want that. Okie dokie. We've got ourselves an African female, and I'm going to character library, and I'm going to make her, don't know, skinny. So she's a skinny African Afro-Mediterranean person. So it's a bit skinnier than normal and blah blah. So if I finalize that, don't want to save the images. So now, once I've got the tunic, fitted it to the template character and saved it as an asset, a Manuel Bastioni asset, not a Unity one, I can put that asset on any of these characters because they've all got the same bone names, and proxy fit them. So if I get female tunic sleeve Q, stands for quads. Oh, that's what I do. Accept. Female tunic, put it on, it doesn't fit. Clearly because the standard character was much shorter and a completely different shape. So to fit this on there would be like, you know, a lot of work screwing around, and then you've got to weight paint it, blah de blah. But this has got a proxy fitting system. I don't want to do that. No. Got a proxy fitting system where you can define like an offset, and it does its stuff, does its jiggery pokery, and then it works. But basically, you click that, and it will fit it to the character, which is awesome. That's saved. Did you imagine trying to do that manually? That would be a nightmare. So now it's fitted normally, and it also, you know, if there's, it's got a modifier on there which will remove geometry from underneath the clothes that you can't see, but it gets a bit awkward down the side of the neck and up this arm sleeves, or you know, it'll remove those bits there, and you don't want to. But anyway, you can remove the quads from it. But it's fitted, and not only is it fitted, but it is weight painted as well. And believe me, I've been messing about trying to weight paint these bloody tunics, and they're a nightmare because of the amount of stretching that goes on here. You end up with one line of quads that's got to stretch when they walk. But this is quite a nice job of weight painting. Turn the X-ray off. Do you know what I mean? That's quite a good job. I think I'm really impressed with that. So I've got a garment now that fits this specific character. I would have to I can now export this as a FBX or whatever, and it fits this specific character. But if I want to fit this to another character, it's very simple to do. So this is how I make clothes in Blender without knowing anything about Blender. Why am I not in female tunic sleeved tab in it? Edit mode. Oh, it doesn't do it in edit. Oh, that's interesting. But the tunic's quite nice. It's quads, low poly, looks well. Oh, you can't. I think it's pose mode. You'll know this. Object mode. Whatever. But anyway, it's weight painted. It works in Unity. Get rid of that. I go into Unity. I haven't textured them yet. I'm doing texturing next. The other thing about sort of game design is you can't really spend too much time on what looks nice. Do you know what I mean? So I haven't textured them yet, but they do work in Unity. So this is the extent of my Blender. These are all sort of my failed experiments. You can see how they become a bloody nightmare, this bit here. Poke throughs and all sorts. But anyway, I'm pretty chuffed. I've made some shoes as well. So that's my workflow for making clothes and characters in Blender. I can also obviously change all the face shapes and all that lot. I won't go into that. So anyway, I just wanted to tell you sort of what I do in Blender.